Right. So as I mentioned earlier, the controllers that we might be using, they might be going out to the database and hitting other services themselves, right? Going out to the file system, going out to a whole bunch of other things, maybe making their own network connections somewhere else, right? So they might have their dependencies. And so that makes it challenging to be able to isolate the control all by itself, so we can test it all by itself, right? So we need to be able to, mock everything, not only in the environment, not only the server environment, not only the web environment, right? We also need to mock any other dependencies that is out there, so that we can isolate and create a unit test that tests it individually. So to do that, we're going to use the a mock bean. It's not shown here. Why is it not shown? Where'd it go? Mocking services. Oh, it didn't fit. Oh, it's too big. It doesn't fit. What we'd like to be able to do is just like we have auto-wired and all that brings us those services to us, right? We would like to be able to create instances of those services, so that we can say, hey, if you're going to use that other thing that goes out to a network, or goes out to the file system, or goes out to a database, if you're going to use that, I'm going to give you an instance, right, that's going to look just identical to that service. And instead of it actually going out to the database to go and fetch this, I'm going to configure what you would have gotten if it would have gone to the database. Right? I'm going to give you the data representation of what you would have gotten if you would have gotten to the database, right? Because I don't want you to go out to the database, right? Because otherwise we would have to have that dependency actually running, right? We need to have actual data in the database, right? And that would complicate things. So what mock bean allows us to do is to create a wrapper around those services and say, hey, if you're going to call this function on that service, well, this is what you would get. This is what you would get, right? Instead of that service actually going out to retrieve it. So to illustrate this, let's create a really simple controller. Again, the only thing that it does is that it has our it's mapped to /greeting, and notice our controller is using a service, a greeting service, right? That it's being injected in here. This is kind of like the equivalent of our repository. And we're mapping here the request mapping to a get. Actually no, it's a request mapping, so it doesn't matter. It could be a get, a post, a put, a delete, it returns whatever the greet returns. So it probably just returns a hello world. So it's trivial, a really trivial service. And here's our service, and there it is. So it's just receiving a hello world. So this is the equivalent of our repository, right? This would be a repository using JPA, going out and doing a query, right, and retrieving a find all or whatnot, and returning some object representation. Okay, all right. So this is the equivalent. The only thing here is that it's returning just a string, right? Not objects, not list of services, not a particular service, right? Not a particular question, not a particular provider, right? It's just returning a string. So here's our test. Right, and notice what it's doing. Right, it's going out and it's using our service. First, we're trying it out and actually going out to the service and see what it returns. Right, so we're saying when get this service. Here's what we're saying. Here's what we're configuring. If we're saying if the controller, where's our controller here? There's our perform, right? We're gonna say /greeting. Yes, that /greeting is gonna do what? The /greeting has there it is, right? /greeting it would use what? Service.greet. See that? we want to break that dependency. We want to break the dependency so that we want to be able to configure and say, if anyone calls this function, this is the result they should get, without actually using that service, because that service might have to go out to a database, right? It might have to go out to some network or whatever, right? We want to be able to say we want to sever here the dependency and saying, if anybody calls that function, I'm going to mock it. I'm going to say this is what they're going to return. They're going to return. So that any algorithm that you might have here that uses that data that is coming back from that dependency, right, can be still tested without actually needing to go out to that dependency. Make sense? Right? So to do that, the mock library, a mock MVC library, allows us to do that. Right? It has a function called when, right? That's going to wrap that call, that service.greet call, and then we can configure what it is that we want to return. Right? If anybody calls that function, that's what they would get, without actually going out to a database, without actually going anywhere. Right? This is what they would get. Right? And now we have severed our dependency with that service. We don't need it anymore, and so we're going to test it. We're going to say mock MVC perform and actually send the greeting. The controller is going to hit that, right? The controller is going to listen to that. We're going to check whether it's okay, and we're going to compare whether we received the hello mock string, and obviously it did. Right? It's going to receive whatever we say. It's going to return here. Make sense? Right? So we have severed the dependency of this controller, right, with the underlying service.